Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live participants and to our online viewers. My name is Nancy Dressel. I'm the Vice President of Wisconsin Reads, and Wisconsin Reads is a nonprofit dedicated to increasing awareness and implementation of evidence-based literacy practices and the science of reading. In the state of Wisconsin right now, we are in our first year of implementing a literacy law called Act 20. If you hear me refer to Act 20 tonight when I'm asking questions, uh, one of my favorite Angieisms that I'm just going to remind us of one more time is that this is not a bill, it's not an initiative, it is a movement. And tonight we can add on another Angieism that you can lead from any position in the school. You can lead from the classroom, from a coach, a reading specialist, a principal. You can lead from anywhere. So we are thrilled to be, as Wisconsin Reads, to be contributing to building leaders throughout schools in Wisconsin and to be contributing to this movement by hosting this three-part virtual book study. Our last one will be next Thursday on April 17th. And we also have a three-part full-day in-person learning opportunities coming up with Angie and A&H Associates in Eau Claire, Wisconsin on May 2nd, May 14th, and May 30th. Participants, please introduce yourself in the chat. Those who introduce yourselves and where you're from and what your role is have a chance at winning a copy of It's Possible. It'll get mailed directly to you. And just a reminder to support the learning of all, please keep your mic muted until the Q&A at the end. You can type questions in the chat because we will monitor them. So if you have not purchased your book yet, I know some people who were here last week just got their book this week and are already sharing how amazing it is. So get online, Amazon or Solution Tree, and order your copy tonight. And this evening, our discussion is going to focus on database decision making and comprehensive assessments, which in the book, It's Possible, a leadership plan for implementing quality reading instruction and ensuring literacy for all by Patti Montgomery and Angela Hanlin. That is from chapters 3 through 6. So we are going to dive right in. I love that I get to ask Angie questions. So we're going to dive right in. Angie, what type of assessments should schools be administering?
Okay, so again, thanks for having me here tonight. Thanks for promoting the book, and thanks to everyone that's joining, especially after teaching a day. I know what that's like, and so to still join this evening, and or if you're even watching the recording later, thank you so much, and thanks for those of you who have purchased the book and just hungry for this information. As far as assessments, there are four types of assessments that comprise a quality comprehensive reading plan. So the four are benchmark screening assessments, diagnostic assessments, progress monitoring assessments, and then summative or outcome assessments. So I want to go back and Nancy, if it's okay, I want to explain each of these and dive into them a little bit deeper. So benchmarking assessments, those can also be called screening assessments. They are sometimes called universal assessments. And the reason they're called universal assessments is because they are administered to everybody. All students receive this assessment, and they take place 3 times a year. We used to hear this be called fall, winter, spring. Now they're being referred to as beginning, middle, and end of year assessments. And we believe that these should be administered within the first 30 days of school, sooner if possible. I always stress the earlier, the better. But benchmark assessments tell us if the students are at grade level or not, and how close they are in regards to grade level. Are they at grade level? Are they above grade level? Are they below grade level? Are they well below grade level? Now, often, our let me back up. Our benchmark assessments tell us two things. They tell us where, they tell us which students need an intervention. And then they also, usually, we can determine from the benchmark assessment what interventions needed for the students. But then we have those tricky students that pop up and we just cannot figure out exactly where to begin intervention. We know they aren't at grade level. And we know they need an intervention, but we don't know exactly where to begin intervention. So for those students, we then administer what is called a diagnostic assessment. And when you think about diagnostic assessment, I want us to look at that and read it backwards. It's literally an assessment that diagnoses. It gives us it helps us diagnose exactly where the intervention should begin. A diagnostic assessment then provides educators with more detailed information that helps teachers make informed decisions regarding the next steps. And when I say the phrase next steps, what I mean by that is the intervention next step and where we go with intervention for a student. These are quick one on one assessments that we give to students who are below grade level in one of the components of reading. There are a lot of free diagnostic assessments out there. Really Great Reading has some free downloads. There are also diagnostic assessments that come with some of the good intervention programs, such as SIPS. That phonics program, it has its own diagnostic assessments and placement assessments that come with those. But most of the assessments that are out there that are diagnostic are decoding assessments. Those are the ones that are most widely available. And what those tell us when we administer them is exactly the decoding issue of the student. Are they stuck in with blends? Are they stuck with digraphs? Are they stuck with CVC? Long vowel words? Do they know vowel teams? Where is it that the interventions need to begin? Now, the third type is progress monitoring, and it's one that I feel is often misunderstood by schools. But progress monitoring assessments, these are once a student has been given a benchmark assessment and they've been found to be below grade level, then all of those students, and remember, all means all. So every single student who is below grade level, they then need to be given progress monitoring assessment. So once a student's been identified as being below grade level on a benchmark, then they need to begin receiving interventions. And if they're receiving interventions, then those students all need to be progress monitored. And I want to stress they must be progress monitored. I know schools that do the benchmarks and then they fail to do the progress monitoring. They don't go to the full gamut of assessments and they leave this component out. And we must progress monitor the students who are receiving interventions so that we know if the intervention is working. Is the student making progress? So,
Angie,
when
can I ask a question?
yeah,
What do you
absolutely.
define as benchmark?
Okay, so I differ from some. So I look at benchmark as any student who is below the 50th percentile because a student who's at the 50th percentile or higher, those are the students that we know are going to be okay on an end of year assessment, and they're going to be okay for reading fluently at their grade level. So when I look at below grade level, I'm talking about anyone that's below the 50th percentile. Thanks for asking so that I
Yeah.
could clear that up. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight when we get into the specific interventions.
Can I ask one more
But
question?
sure, yeah,
So, diagnostic assessments, sometimes from your benchmark screening assessment, you give, let's say, oral reading fluency to all.
yes,
Then there might be some additional assessments from that tool, like nonsense word and letter reading, phoneme segmentation, that are diagnostic because you're only giving it to some. And then there's an additional level of diagnostic that would be like the phonics inventory.
yes,
And I
yes, like
just
a
want to
core
clarify that
phonics
I'm
screener.
understanding that
Yes,
correctly because I think sometimes there's confusion about that there's multiple layers of diagnostic assessment. That some can measure automaticity and some can measure accuracy. Am I
yes.
understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so you can have like let's say you've got a third grade student on Ames Web, okay, or Fastbridge. And so they're well below grade level. So you might go down and you might give a lower level assessment to those students, and that can help you diagnose where they are and where intervention needs to begin. But then there are actual diagnostic assessments that are labeled diagnostic assessments and called diagnostic assessments. And then those diagnostic assessments really drill down to exactly where is it? Where is the decoding issue for the student? Where is that? Like I said, is that in vowel teams?
Mhm.
Is that long vowel? Where is it that they are struggling? Because if we can find that spot, if we can diagnose exactly that point, then that lets us know where the interventions need to begin. And the book offers and lists some diagnostics, and it lists some great assessment options in the side margins of the book.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome. And if there's any other questions you have, please ask me so I can get everything cleared up. So when we are setting up the progress monitoring, and like I said, we're going to talk more about this later. But right now, I just want to throw out that we do set up a different frequency for these students. So if we have a student who just barely meets benchmark, okay, then we can still set a student up on monthly progress monitoring just to make sure that they're okay. Because through all of this lens that we're talking about tonight, I want us to remember that our goal is not a mediocre goal. Our goal is 95% of students reading at grade level. So these are the best practices to reach all of our students. Okay. So I'm thinking in my mind, if a child's like even at the 40th percentile, I'm still going to progress monitor that child once a month because I want to know if they're making progress. I don't want to wait to the next benchmark to see if they are okay or not. Okay. If there's a student who scores below grade level, then I could, and it's not too far below, they're below, but not extremely far below, then I could set up every other week. Okay. Every 2 weeks, progress monitoring. But if I've got a student that's that true tier 3 child and they are well below grade level, then I'm going to progress monitor weekly. And without progress monitoring, then as schools, what we're doing is we're waiting until that next benchmark assessment. And if we wait, then half the year's gone by and we can't get that time back. So, with our progress monitoring, there's got to be a sense of urgency to get that set up, get those interventions started, and then regularly assess those students to see if they're making progress. Then we have summative and outcome assessments. So, when we say outcome assessments, those are the big stakes tests. Those are the state assessments that every state has. That's like an end of course exam, something like that. But then we have summative assessments. And these are often found in a really good, strong core reading program. And they are the end of unit summative assessments. And we believe that starting in third grade and then all the way through after that in a core reading program, that these are administered to students. Because this measures how students are doing on state standards, where everything else I've talked about, none of those other assessments that I've talked about are talking about state standards. But a summative assessment is how students are doing on state standards. And that's another piece of data that we need to collect because those assessments are a great indicator for how students are going to score on those end of year state assessments. So those are the 4 types of assessments that all schools need to administer to truly have a comprehensive reading plan set up in their district.
Angie, how long, I mean, obviously early reading, K3, but how long should benchmark screening and this progress monitoring diagnostic continue? Is it all the way up through high school, especially with oral reading fluency?
So, as a superintendent, I did benchmark testing for fluency, middle school and high school. We did not do it with our seniors because a lot of them were in senior English. They were doing, college credit courses. And I want to throw that out because as a superintendent, when we did this for the very first time, and it was a shock to everyone's system that I was requesting a fluency assessment and a reading and math comprehension assessment for or comprehensive assessment, benchmark assessment for students in middle school and high school, these were students who had not had a phonics approach in reading. And so it had been done at the elementary. These students were missed. They had been in a balanced literacy approach. And we had 66% of the school population in tier 3. We were able to reduce that to 5%, but we began with 66% of students in need of an intervention because they were reading well below grade level. So it's very important that we continue. This is not, and I know a lot of the bills and the state bills, they do it K3, but I want us to look at that as that's only staying in compliance. I want us to think about the book's not talking about compliance. We're talking about best practices for how to reach all. It's a leadership plan for all. So it's a higher level of commitment there. And so then it definitely needs to go beyond third grade. Wonderful question, though, Nancy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you ready for the next slide?
I am, absolutely.
Oh, look at that. There's another question. So, are there, I mean, this a lot of schools, especially in Wisconsin, but in many states, are stepping into more benchmark assessments, more diagnostic, and more progress monitoring. And there's only so many minutes in the day. So, are there ineffective assessment practices that schools should move away from?
Yes, absolutely. And we often find that schools are doing too many assessments and we're assessing too much and we're spending too much time on assessments. And especially when a school is moving from a balanced literacy approach to a structured literacy approach, then the assessment recommendations are actually quite different. And the book really rolls that out. I'm going to give a brief overview of that here on this slide. So there are ineffective practices that we know now that we need to move away from. The number one leading one of those is running records. The others are observational assessments, reading level based assessments, standards based assessments, informal reading inventories, and then untimed assessments. So now I want to go back and I want to explain what I mean by those when I say all of those. And if that's ineffective, then what do we do for it to be an effective assessment practice? Running records, that's something that's been done a lot with programs such as Fountas and Pinnell, units of study, running records. That's a practice we need to move away from. It's been proven to be ineffective. And instead, we give those benchmark, or you can call those screening assessments, where we give those to everybody. Observational assessments, where teachers were making observational notes and observational assessments on how the students were doing in the class, okay, just by observation or a feeling of how they're doing. Those are replaced then in an effective literacy approach with progress monitoring probes. Sorry, the weather has really got my allergies stirred up. Sorry. So that we need to move then to progress monitoring probes, because those are quick 1 to 3 minute probes that truly tell us if the student's making progress or if they're not. It's not just an observation by a classroom teacher. Instead of reading level assessments that gave us a reading level, that's where we need to go to what I was talking about, the diagnostic assessment, where it literally gives us the level of decoding that student is on. And it gives us a starting point for interventions. I mean, being on a reading level D, what does that tell me? But if I know exactly that a student doesn't know vowel teams, then I know exactly where to start my intervention. Standards-based assessments, again, we need to replace those with diagnostic assessments to truly tell us where an intervention needs to start. And then there used to be practices such as informal reading inventories. Well, now we have outcome assessments or summative assessments. Summative assessments. I've taught a reading unit and then I give that assessment, and then I can look at where did the student score low, Did all the students score low in an area? Did specific students score low? And then it tells me what to do with my instruction and how to then close the gaps and meet the needs of my students. Remember, we look at assessments to look for skill gaps because then we use data to plan our instruction and we use data to plan our interventions. So we're looking at where are the skill gaps and what do I need to do to close those gaps. And finally, we need to move away from untimed assessments to timed assessments. And it's not like a gotcha tool. I'm often asked about this. Well, some students don't do well on time, or they get nervous, or there's anxiety. We have to do timed assessments for one thing. And the one word is automaticity. Assessments are timed to ensure that students have acquired the information with automaticity so that they can do it automatically, because that's how we know that the student is really strong. So that is a summary of the practices we need to move away from and the ones that are now we know that are most effective. You can go ahead to the next question.
So teachers have valid and reliable assessments, and they have data that they can use, that they're using to inform their instruction and match to the specific skill gaps. But how do they really know if what they are doing is working?
The only way to really know that is through progress monitoring assessments. It's the only way to know if the intervention is working. What we are doing for this child, is it working? I love the question by Dr. Jan Hasbrook. We were blessed that she wrote the foreword on our book. And she says progress monitoring answers the question, is our work working? So we only know if the students are making progress by looking at those weekly progress monitoring probes, or every other week or monthly, however often they're being progress monitored. So when we set up progress monitoring, it comes down to two categories: who and then how often. So let's start with who. Who gets progress monitored? Well, all students who are below grade level. All students. And again, I see schools make the error of saying, well, let's only progress monitor our tier 3 students, but that's not going to close the gap in all of our students. Any student who's below grade level, that's a tier 2 student as well. A student who's barely below grade level, I still am going to set up progress monitoring for those students on a monthly basis just to do a check-in, because the alternative to that is what I did years ago before I knew any better, is we only would do the beginning, middle, and end of year as classroom teacher. And I would start off, get the baseline scores, teach a whole semester, and then roll into January and get it, and then find out that a student was still not making progress and half the year was gone. The other question then is, okay, if they're going to receive progress monitoring, then how often, with what frequency? We've talked about that a little bit, but I just want to go over it again. Our tier 2 students are often called targeted or strategic. It means they need targeted interventions. And those are the students, they're close to grade level, and probably more than likely, what it means is that if they receive a targeted intervention, then they are more than likely going to meet grade level. We can progress monitor those students every other week or weekly. Every 2 weeks or monthly, okay? Every 2 weeks or monthly. What that depends upon is how close they are to that 50th percentile. All right. The closer they are, then it can be monthly. The farther away they are, let's say they're the 30th percentile, I would do those students every 2 weeks. But then we go into the students who are tier 3. These students are often called intensive students, intensive kiddos. These are the students who are well below benchmark. These students need to be monitored weekly, at bare minimum every 10 days, but I prefer weekly. And again, I need to stress, no, there's no time to waste with these students. We need to get these set up right after benchmark promptly so we can start the intervention, start progress monitoring. There must be a sense of urgency with these students. They have to be a high priority. So last session, you heard me talk about universal instruction. And that's the best strategy to reach all of our students. We suggest in the book starting in two places if you really want to meet the needs of all learners. And one, it's high quality tier one intervention, and then a very high quality tier three intervention. High quality tier one instruction and high quality tier three intervention. So the book provides recommendations for the number of minutes of interventions for different grade levels. So often we know a student needs a tier three intervention. How long? I mean, what does that look like? So for kindergarten, if a student is in tier three, that often then can be met, we can meet their needs by providing 15 to 25 minutes per day, daily, daily, 5 days a week. First grade, same thing. That can normally be addressed by 15 to 25 minutes of intervention done on a daily basis, 5 times a week. Second grade, though, second grade, I'm getting closer to that third grade level. Second grade, it's going to require more time. So if I'm tier three in second grade, I've got a larger gap to fill. So then it's more than likely going to take us 25, 30, up to 35 minutes of intervention to close the gap in our tier three students. And then by third grade, then that goes upwards to 35, 40, 45 minutes, normally 35 to 45 minutes. And again, I need to stress that it's done daily. I often get asked a question, can we do tier three interventions 2 to 3 times a week? Can you? You can. Should you? Absolutely not. These need to be done daily. Again, these students are well below grade level, well below benchmark, and we cannot waste a moment. You heard me talk about last week, you heard me talk about that at maximizing instructional minutes, that every minute matters and we don't have a minute to waste. I just saw a question. Does the size of the group matter? Normally, you'll have groups of about 5 to 6 kids, 5 to 7 kids in tier three pull out. Now, if you have large numbers of students needing intervention and few interventionists, I have seen groups have to be larger. But ideally, it's about 5 to 7 students sitting in that intervention group. And remember, the goal that we're working towards is that 95% of students reading at grade level. Okay, Nancy, you can go ahead.
You just kind of alluded to the question that I was thinking of.
Okay.
Because often people align tier one, tier two, and tier three to uh, positions and spaces in their building,
Yep.
and not necessarily the students' data and what their level of risk is. And so, is there a percentile that you would define as tier three or tier two or tier one? Because some programs say that the highest level of risk is from the first to the 10th percentile. Other programs, like other states have different laws that, in Wisconsin, we have to provide an intervention and weekly progress monitoring for anyone below the 25th percentile. So are there percentiles that you align with tier one, tier two, and tier three?
Well, I always refer to tier one as the 50th percentile and higher. That's the ones I always look at. And then I look at tier two, the students who are below that. In the book, I believe that we label tier three as the 15th percentile and below.
Thank
I'm going to have to dig that. I'm going to have to dig into the book and find that. And I talk about it a little bit more if you want to go on to the next question.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
got I've got a little bit more information on it coming up.
Yep. So we understand the importance of interventions that are in support of student success, but how do we use the data to identify and then match the right interventions for each student?
Okay. So I just want to remind everyone that we cannot intervene our way out of a tier one problem. We cannot intervene our way out of a school-wide reading issue. When we have over 50% of students that are not reading at grade level, then we have to tackle two issues at the same time: universal instruction and interventions. So in the book, we suggest, Patty and I suggest and believe that it's best to have a minimum number of highly effective, validated intervention programs. Okay. So we must intervene quickly. Now, on page 88, Patty writes that the research abounds that 90 to 95% of all students can learn to read when given appropriate instruction and intervention. So, what is it that we mean when we say interventions? By interventions, then what we mean is validated instructional programs and practices that are, and these are the three key components: they are systematic, they are explicit, and they are delivered with a sense of urgency and a level of intensity to meet the needs of the students. The number one error that I see in schools when they are providing interventions to students is they're not doing it at a brisk enough pace and a level of intensity that the students are going to actually be able to reach grade level and benchmark. I see that teachers, because the students are below grade level and they feel that they need extra help, then actually they slow it down in the intervention room. And a really validated program, a lot of those are scripted, and those have to be delivered at a brisk, perky pace because it's the only way that the student then is allowed the number of repetitions that they need to truly master that skill. So we've got to then do that with a sense of urgency. And again, no time to waste. No, there should be no lost time between transitions. Picking those students up, getting them to the room and intervention, that also needs to be done at a very quick pace with a high priority. Now, tier two can often be done in the classroom by the classroom teacher in small group instruction. Those students do not have to be pulled out of the room. But in tier three, and this is where it gets tricky, tier three, those interventions are in addition to grade level reading instruction. Okay, so in the book, we describe what a tier three student needs on a daily basis. So, first, they need explicit systematic instruction on grade level. They receive that in whole group instruction by the classroom teacher. Then they need small group instruction by the classroom teacher that is aimed at exactly their level of need. What you were asking about a minute ago, Nancy, their level of need, their skill gap that we have seen on an assessment. That's where the teacher then provides that, okay, in small group. They then receive an additional 20 minutes or more of another dose of what they need in a tier two small group instruction. And then a tier three student, though, is also going to receive the additional 25 to possibly 45 minutes, depending upon their grade level and their severity of tier three instruction of exactly what they need. And often tier three instruction is that true pull out instruction. And I've seen a lot of schools do it now effectively with push in, where basically you've got two teaching tables going on in the room. You've got the teacher that's doing small group instruction, the interventionist comes in, they see those students, and then they're getting small group instruction with the teacher and then also small group instruction with the interventionist in that tier three program. So, for example, when we meet them based upon their need. So, if I have a student who they come up with a fluency issue, and I don't know what type of intervention they need, then I look at it. Is it a rate issue? Or is it a decoding issue? And what I mean by that is the first thing we look at for fluency is accuracy. If a child is not reading with 98, 99, or 100% accuracy, then what they need is a decoding intervention. And I must fix the decoding issue and the accuracy issue before we look at the rate issue. And then after accuracy is fixed with the decoding issue, then we can go on to a fluency issue.
Did you just say 98 or 99% accuracy?
Yes. Um,
I've often heard 95%. we should dig deeper into decoding if their accuracy is 97 or lower.
Yes. Yeah.
That is an important nuance to me. Maybe you.
Yes. I was told 95 for a long time.
Mhm.
And then as a building principal, when I began working with Schools Cubed and they stressed 98, and it caused us to have more students in
Mhm.
a decoding intervention. And this is what I found. There were some that were okay at that 95 for a little bit and then they dropped. Because then when you add those next skills, when you really start working through that progression of reading skills, they weren't truly okay. They were okay for a little while, but then they were not, and they would fall off. And so then we would make sure that they were at 98% accuracy or higher before we had them exit out of a decoding intervention.
And I just want to also clarify for myself and our participants and the viewers. For tier three, so students that are at the 15th percentile and below potentially, they not only should get whole group instruction, but they should be getting essentially two doses of matched instruction, one by the classroom teacher during small group instruction that is provided to all by the classroom teacher, and then
Yes.
one during an additional time that is the best qualified person to provide that matched instruction.
Yes. And often what you'll see is the tier three student will go out and then they'll miss that small group instruction with the classroom teacher. And that's a myth because what they need is tier three. They get everything above. So they get every single thing they need in addition to the tier three. So they need that whole group instruction. Then they need the small group instruction from the classroom teacher. And the classroom teacher is still going to be addressing skill gaps, but then they're going to get that really targeted specific intervention, that intensive intervention, then in addition to what they've received from the classroom teacher. And so they do not need to miss whole group or small group with the teacher. Because if so, then they're just going to get farther behind.
And it really made me think about the nuance that both the experts in the building and the classroom teacher need to be really familiar with the students' benchmark diagnostic and progress monitoring data in order to be able to match instruction twice a day by two different people. Is that an accurate description?
Yes. And so that's why we need, and we're going to get to how to analyze data, but that's when we're analyzing data. That's why we've got to have the classroom teacher and the interventionist in those data team meetings. Everyone's got to be on the same page because if the student's well below, what's the piece I'm doing as classroom teacher? What's the piece that I'm doing as the interventionist? Who is doing what? What are we giving the student to keep them at grade level? So a great question came up that I'd like to clarify before we move on, if that's okay, Nancy. If
Absolutely.
they are below 98% accuracy, should they receive both a decoding and a fluency intervention? It would start with just a decoding intervention. We need to fix decoding first, and after that, then we can fix the rate issue. But we've got to clear up the accuracy issues first because often they'll have both, but we need them reading accurately first, and that's with the decoding issue, or that's with the decoding intervention. Did that answer your question, Carrie?
Would you still progress monitor them in fluency if they're like, say, a second grade? Like a
Yes.
second grade?
So what you'll be progress monitoring them in is in fluency. So you'll be looking at their rate. So on that fluency, on that ORF or CBM, you'll see two things. You'll see their words per minute, but you'll also see their rate of accuracy. So you'll be looking at words per minute and you'll want that to be going up, but then you'll be looking at the accuracy. But we've got to address the accuracy first. Jen Hasbrook says accuracy first, foremost, and forever, because that's how we clear up the actual decoding issue. And then after that, then we can drill down and start looking at the rate. But the better they get at decoding, then the rate's going to go up. But we still then can have a child that's got great accuracy, but they still have a fluency rate issue. Yes, but we've got to clear up the decoding issues first for
Thank you.
accuracy. You're welcome.
Well, this connects right into the next question. So we are learning about assessment types, and we have a lot more data, and we're using that to inform instruction, and we're progress monitoring. But now we're understanding that students need matched instruction, potentially by multiple people. So how do you effectively analyze the data that you're collecting to inform decisions that are going to drive student success and improve instructional practices?
Oh, this is the exciting part. Okay. All right. Everyone get ready. Here we go. Okay. So schools collect data all the time, right? Give me a thumbs up. Yes or no, right? Schools collect data all the time, but they often fail to analyze it correctly. They collect it, but then they don't take the step and we don't analyze the data correctly. We've got to analyze it. And here's what we're analyzing it for, because we're going to use that data to plan instruction, to plan intervention, and to set goals. Because remember, we're doing this to say that it is possible to reach all students and to read at 95% of our students reading at grade level. So the very first thing we do is we establish data meetings. And the very first ones we establish are the ones that come right after a benchmark. So the week after we finish our benchmark, beginning, middle, and end of year, we have our beginning, middle, and end of year data meetings. And we use the beginning of year data to set middle of year goals and end of year goals. So when we as schools, when we have that beginning of year data, we look at where our students are. Where are they? Remember those 3 questions from John Hattie. Where are we? Where are we going? And how close are we to reaching that goal? Where are we? That's the benchmark. Where are we going? That's the goal. So we look at where we are at the beginning of year and we set an end of year goal. And then we look at the difference and then we decide what's halfway between there and we set that as our middle of year goal. Okay. And then we build in our check-in meetings. We build in check-in meetings to see if the students are making progress, because we cannot wait till that next benchmark to see if they're making progress, to see if our work is working. We have to know sooner than that. So the first thing that we build in is we build in 6-week check-in meetings. And we build those in. That is 6 weeks of progress monitoring data, 6 points then. That can truly tell me if the intervention's working or not. And if we've gone 3 to 6 weeks and it is not working, then at that point we know we have got to make a change with our intervention, with the intensity, with the frequency of it. We've got to change something. Now, we find Schools Cube Schools and through the book and through my journey, we have found that we need to weekly be looking at that progress monitoring data. We've got to have a team of people looking at that progress monitoring data to see if those trend lines are going up. Are those students making progress? And if not, what are we going to do about it? The other way that we analyze the data is going student by student. When I was a classroom teacher, I would go to a data meeting, and they were only 3 times a year. And so I would go to a data meeting and they would tell me my percentages. 30%, tier 3, 30% this, 40%, whatever. They would tell me my percentage. They never broke it down beyond the percentage. We have to look at student by student, because we've got to look at exactly the skill gap of that student. Look at those sub-test skills. Don't just look at the reading composite. Look at those specific assessments and where did they score low at? Where are they needing the intervention? Because if we go student by student, this is what we then need to ask ourselves. Which students are making progress? Which students are not making progress? Why? Why are they not making progress? And then what are we going to do in response to the data? So in the data meetings, and this is where schools don't often go deep enough and analyze the data to a deep enough level. One, by not going deep enough, but then they fail to develop a plan in the data meeting. So no teacher leaves a data meeting without an instructional plan. I cannot stress that enough. The classroom teacher leaves with an instructional plan, and the interventionist leaves with an instructional plan. This is where we need to have conversations, deep, rich conversations, diagnostic conversations about our data to see what's going on. So when we set goals, we set grade level goals, building goals, class goals, classroom goals, and we share those with our students. And then we set goals for individual students. Where's this child at? Where do we want them to be by the next benchmark? Then we use that data to make data-informed decisions. Data-based decision making is a buzzword and a hot topic. That is a buzz phrase. And schools say that they're doing it, but if they're really doing it, then let's read it backwards. Data-based decision making. Are schools really making decisions based on data? Are they making instructional decisions? Are they planning instructional lessons based on data? Are they planning intervention lessons based on data? In our data meetings, I always had our teachers ask ourselves the questions: where are we? Where are we going? How are we doing? How close are we to meeting that goal? And then what are we going to do in response to that? We also would ask ourselves which students were making progress and why, which students were not and why not? What are we going to, and then what are we going to do about it? Richard DeFore, Patti uses these questions also in the book. Richard DeFore, with his PLC work, came up with these 4 questions, and these are great for discussion questions as well. What do we want our students to know? How do we know that we have gotten them there? How do we know that they've learned it? What do we do when they struggle? And how do we extend the learning for those that are already there? So, just like the students who are well below need an intervention, what are we doing for the students who are above grade level, at grade level, or above? What are we doing for them? Because they need specific intervention as well. So how are we going to move those students forward? So the book goes on and provides, if I've got time, Nancy, just to share real quickly, the book goes on and provides that there are 8 principles that we need. This is not a slide, I'm just going to share that there are 8 principles, that guiding principles that ensure a highly effective data meeting process. Okay. So 1, we need to get the meetings to where they are 45 minutes or less. These do not need to be an hour and a half or 2 meetings. I've had them be over an hour in the beginning. We need to get a protocol, a structure to these so that they're 45 minutes or less so that teachers can get back to their classrooms. There is an assurance in these meetings that all students who are below grade level are being progress monitored. We don't say, well, we only have time to do the 25th percentile and below. No, all students who are below need to be progress monitored. There's an awareness of which students are making progress and which students are not. And the only way we know is by going student by student. Then the area of individual student need is evident, and it matches the instructional grouping or the instructional strategy that these students are receiving. There's an alert for when there's an alert system built in for when a child's not making progress. We describe it in the book as dot cards. I don't have time to go deeply into that, but we set up a card, and the student on progress, it's only for the students being progress monitored. There's examples and pictures in the book. And if they are making progress, it's a green dot. If they're just not making progress or barely below, or like made progress, but it's only like 2 words, they only increase their fluency by 2 words, it's yellow. And then if they're not making progress or if they're stagnant, it's red. And that's an alert, because when you walk in and when you see that, whether that be an electronic version, if you've got a lot of students, or a card system, you can in one look tell by if I'm seeing green dots or red, do we have a problem? And so there need to be people in the building who are weekly reviewing the progress monitoring to see if we have a problem or not. They're also, it needs to be discussed immediately. If these students are not making progress, what are we going to do about it? And then number 7 of the 8 guiding principles is that principals and instructional leaders are in these meetings and they are readily able to see the trends. Principals must be involved in this and they must be leading the work. And it's not done in a punitive fashion, but they're sitting in there helping the teachers solve the problems and having those instructional conversations about what to do. And then schools, the 8th principle is that schools readily know how the students are doing and how they are growing. And we only know by keeping a relentless focus. In the book, Patty and I both describe it as a laser-like focus on the data and analyzing that data. Okay, you can go on. I'm passionate about that, so I'm sorry I got a little carried away.
It's amazing because the reason I'm getting excited just hearing you say that is because I've experienced the growth that can happen when you maintain
Yes,
laser-like focus. And it's the most empowering experience that I've ever had as an educator. And I want every educator
yes,
to feel that experience that what they are doing with students truly is what is changing the trajectory of growth for that student.
yes.
So
Excellent point. And it's addictive. It is
yes.
addictive and it is empowering to teachers when they see that what they've done in their classrooms made a difference. And when the interventionist sees it, what they've done's made a difference.
Mhm.
Oh, there's just nothing like it. Thanks for pointing that out.
Somehow we magically transitioned right into the next question too,
Okay.
because teachers are working so hard.
So hard.
They are so committed to their students. They're putting in so much extra time and extra effort into planning, into learning, into looking at data. But it can be when you start really digging into actually looking at this data and looking at it regularly, it can be really overwhelming to confront the significant deficits of the students that potentially are in front of you. So, how can leaders, whether we're leading from the classroom
Yep.
or the intervention room or the principal's office, how can leaders help teachers embrace and effectively use their data to drive improvement?
So it can be extremely hard. And I've been there. I've been there as the teacher. I've been there as the leader. It can be extremely hard to accept the data, especially when it's low, because you're working so hard. And you're like, how is this possible? My story is our building average was a 13% on a state assessment. 13, that's not a fun number to have in a data meeting, unless you've only got 13% in tier 3. But we only had 13% at grade level. So that is not a great feeling. No one in the room felt good, but we have to own the data. We have to own where we are. And here's the important point. We have to own where we are because, and everyone listen, we aren't staying there. So we have to own where we are and we have to have a growth mindset of we just aren't there yet. But we have to own where we are because we're going to want to own that 95%. And to own the 95, we're going to have to own the 13, the 15, the 21, the 33, because we're all going to want to embrace and own that 95 that we're going to. So we've got to radically accept and own the data. It doesn't matter where you are, just accept it and own it. And say, this is where we are. And on to the next question, where are we going? Where are we going? And focus that because we aren't staying here. It helps too to take the focus off of teaching because that's what we take so personally, the teaching. Place it on the learning. It's not whether we've taught it or not, it's did they learn it? And if we look at the learning, a teacher can say, but I taught it. And I always said, I know you did. And often I was in the room and I saw you, but they didn't learn it. So what are we going to do to get them to learn it? I also say, and I always say with my staff and the people I work with, we've got to leave our egos at the door. And we just have to look at the numbers and what are we going to do about it? But if the data's not up and visible to see, it's really hard to own it. I write in the book about putting it on the walls. I built a data room and I had the numbers up, and we had our data meetings in those rooms. It was surrounding us for all to see, and it helps you really take ownership of that. Look at data meetings as problem solving sessions and problem solving opportunities. They are not coming together and, oh, this is terrible. What are we going to do? Look at every single data meeting as this is a chance to come together as a team and solve a problem. What are we going to do? We're the change agents. What are we going to do to address the needs of our students? And then data should be used to intentionally plan instruction and interventions. So no matter how low the data is, though I want to point out, we cannot lower the expectations. We've got to keep the expectations high, because this is often, I hope you can see my hands, this is often what we do. The students are here, grade levels here. And so what we do is this. We lower the expectations. Oh, but they're down here. No, we have to keep the expectations high. And here's the verb. We have to take them there. We have to take them there with our instruction and with our interventions. So we can't lower the expectations. We keep the expectations high, keep the goals high, and just truly embrace and own the data. And just remind yourself, no matter where we are, we're not staying here. And we're going to want to own that 95 and celebrate it. So let's just own and celebrate every single number that we're at. But celebrate any and all growth. Any growth by a teacher, by an interventionist, by a class, by a student, celebrate it all. And that leads us to our last question, Nancy. I've got just a few minutes.
Yes. So when we're struggling maintaining our laser focus, what core beliefs do leaders need to be able to consistently connect to in order to effectively lead the work of using data to drive student outcomes and improve instructional practices?
Okay, so I'm going to bring this home. Are you all ready? All right. Okay. All right. The first core belief that every single person in the school system must adopt is all means all. All means all, exclamation mark. And this is what we've got to start doing as educators. We have got to stop putting a comma where that exclamation mark is. And we do it all the time. All means all. I've got an exclamation mark, but we do all means all, comma. But Angie, they have an IEP. But Angie, they're a child of trauma. But Angie, they're a free lunch. But Angie, they have a specific learning disability. They have an IEP. They have dyslexia. They're an EL student. And the list just goes on and on and on. No, all means all, exclamation mark. And then when we look deeper at data, we've got to believe and know that we can make a difference in the lives of every single learner. We can reach and teach all. Every child that comes through our door, and I always do this when I'm training people, every child that walks through the doors of our school, we can meet the needs of that child. Our data discussions are powerful and empowering for teachers, because in those discussions, we are deciding what they need to do to go back in their rooms and teach, and what the interventionist needs to go back in their room and do to meet the needs of that child. When I went to a data meeting and no one gave me anything except a percentage, that was not empowering. It was very defeating and discouraging for me. But when these truly become problem-solving sessions, we empower our teachers to go forth then, and they know exactly what to do. They've used that data to make their instructional plan. So teachers must leave data meetings with a plan for instruction. We've got to relentlessly review progress monitoring. And the building leader must believe it is their responsibility to do it, or it will not happen. It can't be the responsibility of an interventionist, the instructional coach. I've always involved those people. Don't get me wrong. And it's not placed upon the backs of the teachers. And again, those people need to be in the discussions. I've brought all of those people in, special ed teachers, school psych, everybody. But it does not fall on the backs of them. It truly is the responsibility of the building leader to make sure that this happens. We've got to celebrate any and all growth, because that means what we're doing is working. And then we celebrate it and we set that next goal. Make the goals in the beginning attainable. Make them attainable so that we can have a quick win. Everyone feels good, and then we move on to the next goal. Leaders, the belief is that we build this work. We create this system in our schools intentionally, or we fail to do so. And it's also by intention. It is deliberate. This does not happen accidentally. This happens because we've got a building leader who has made the intentional decision to build this system. Assessment and database decision making, those are two systems that we talk about in the book. And as leaders, we build these for our staff and for our students, or we fail to do those. And the focus has always got to be the number one goal that we're all working on is literacy for all, that all will learn to read. And it really is that simple. It's the intentional work, and the goal is always that all will read, 95 will read. So when I close out, I want us to think about if teachers are not using the assessments that they're giving to the students, then the assessments are a waste of time. If we're not having data meetings, if we're not drilling down to student by student, if we're not using that data to plan instruction and plan interventions, then we're wasting the teacher's time and we're wasting the student's time. If we give, and this is where it really comes back to compliance or commitment, because you can have a bill that says you've got to do your 3 benchmarks. Well, that's compliance. But if we're truly committed, we will we'll make sure that every student below grade level is being progress monitored. We'll build in those check-in meetings to review the progress monitoring data. We'll have that relentless focus where someone is relentlessly looking weekly at that progress monitoring data to truly see if the students are making progress or not. And it's those core beliefs and that core work that makes this happen for all. And when we do it, it's what? It's possible. It's possible for everybody. See what I did there? Did you catch it? It's possible. It's possible for all.
You're amazing. So we are just coming up to the edge, but I want to wrap it up with our last couple points. So because we just again touched the tip of the iceberg about assessment in 60 minutes tonight, and there is so much more for people within the book. It's possible. So what can teachers and leaders expect to learn about assessment when they get their copy of the book?
We go ahead and go to the next slide because I made a few notes. One, they will learn how to create a comprehensive assessment plan. What does that look like in the district? They'll be encouraged to create an instructional calendar with these dates in it. They'll share that out with all the staff. They'll really develop an understanding of intervention, what it means to intervene, who we intervene for, how do we intervene, what do we give as the intervention, how many minutes is that. They'll learn how to set up an intervention schedule in their school to make that happen successfully. They'll learn how to establish a data collection system. It's one of the 6 systems that we talk about. How do you truly establish that and then sustain it in a building? And then it goes deeper than just the system because it's systems and structures. They'll also learn then how to structure it. So they'll look at agenda protocols and and there are protocols, templates in the book. If schools don't have a protocol for a data meeting, those are in the book. Then they'll learn how to effectively analyze the data, how to go student by student. And again, there are protocols that will help schools do that. And then finally, they'll learn how to make instructional decisions based upon the data. And there are rubrics, there are resource guides at the back of the book. And all of those are in there. And then all of this makes reaching 95% literacy proficiency possible for schools. But that's kind of just a gist of what it is that they will learn in those chapters.
I truly don't know how you and Patti Montgomery were able to power pack so much into this one resource. I am blown away that I again have 5 pages of notes. You maybe saw me, kept reaching for paper
Oh my gosh.
again. They're all Angie-isms. So if you haven't gotten a chance to order your book yet, I don't often go out of my way to recommend books. I'll share a copy of one I have and an interesting page, but I don't think I could make a higher recommendation for a professional resource than getting this book for all K-12 leaders that want to improve outcomes in their school district. Um,
Thank you for saying that.
oh,
Thank you.
mhm. And I'm even more excited that we have these three opportunities coming up in May for a full day of learning with Angie. The one that's going to align to the little taste that we got tonight is the opportunity on May 16th. So May 2nd is focused on your universal instruction, and then May 16th, Angie's going to take us on a super deep dive into assessment, and then May 30th is leadership. So if you can join us for one or for all, we're going to get a chance to go deeper from here. I know that I will be listening to this over again because there was so much power packed into this session tonight. And I just can't imagine what I'm going to be able to pull from getting to spend a whole day with you about assessment. So there will be
Exciting.
links. There will be links. The reminder email will go out right after this, and we'll get it posted online so that plenty of people can have access. And I want to share the exciting news. Our winner of a copy of the book It's Possible Tonight is Natalie Witt. So, Natalie, you will get an email right after asking what address you'd like to have it sent to, and I'll get it ordered for you tonight. So last but not least, um, make sure that you've got Angie's contact information. She so generously shares all of her knowledge with people so that you can continue to learn from her and all the places that she's got an online presence and reach out to her with your questions. So,
And
Angie, any last final thought?
Another great resource is if you look at Patty Montgomery and Schools Cubed, and I should have put it on here, and the Keys to Literacy. Schools Cubed has merged with Keys to Literacy. They have a wealth of free resources on there as well for schools. So many free resources for schools to download. Schools Cubed, there are things that you can download from the book. Solution Tree also. If you go to Solution Tree / It's Possible, there are free downloads that people can get based upon the book. And those are all just free resources to people.
I will add the Schools Cubed and the Solution Tree links into the email that I send to
Thank
all
you.
registrants.
Okay, wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live
Thanks,
tonight and
everyone.
for watching.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see you guys next week.
Mhm.